Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. Thanks for tuning in and taking the time to join us. And today we've got a bit of a different episode. I'm joined by Amanda and Phil to rate 10 popular B2B marketing tactics. So it should be pretty cool. The way this is going to work is I'll read out each tactic. We'll give our rating from 1 to 5, 1 being the most awful, terrible tactic in the B2B marketing world, in our opinion. 5 being the best tactic in the B2B marketing world, in our opinion. But there's a bit of a twist here because everything seems to be, or seems to depend in the marketing world. We're only going to be allowed to use or rate 3 once. That way, we're not always sitting on the fence and not really making a decision. Otherwise, everything could be 3, couldn't it? Once we've given our rating, we'll give some justification behind it based on our experience and research, etc., and then we'll move on to the next one. And before we get into this, none of us know what each other's ratings are. We haven't talked about them beforehand, so it should be an interesting discussion. Let's see who gets really angry and defensive, and yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, so tactic number 1 we are rating is SEM, like paid search. Who wants to kick things off with their rating?
I can.
Before we go in, do we also, are we interested in our audience's ratings for these?
If you want to.
Yeah, I want comment your numbers.
Yeah,
please.
definitely. Actually, do comment on your thoughts as to what your rating would be on a tactic. I can go first with my thoughts on SEM. So the way I've tried to assess each of these is to think about them. If they were the only tactic you were to employ this year, what impact could they have for you? And so for SEM, I've put that down pretty low. I've put 2. Because ultimately, I think if the other pieces of your puzzle aren't in place, you can be funneling money into nothing. You can also be you're spending today, but as soon as you're not spending, you're not generating long-term gains. So for me, it's pretty low, actually. Obviously, the fence sitter in me would say that if it's part of a well-rounded strategy, absolutely, it can be effective for you. But these days, more and more, people are becoming quite savvy to ads, I would say, and trying to, plenty of people try and avoid them, block them, whatever they want to do to get around them. So it's not necessarily the case that they'll have any success for you, especially if you're not doing them as part of a bigger picture. So 2.
Phil?
All right. Well, as with all of these tactics, my view is through the lens of reliable repeatability and what in most situations produces the most predictable outcome. And that's not to say that a 1 means never do it and a 5 means always do it, but it does mean prioritize them accordingly compared to one another. And for that reason, SEM paid search gets a big fat 1 from me, because as much as I would like to think that it can work as part of a well-rounded strategy, I've yet to be convinced that the juice is worth the squeeze. Over and over and over again, I've seen people put great effort into addressing ad relevance, keyword selection, landing page quality, experience, and then go back to keyword selection again, and yet fail to produce the sorts of results that we're all promised from it. So it's right down the bottom for me.
I don't think you'll be surprised that I also rated it a 1. Hence, my post on LinkedIn last week where I kind of called out paid search as potentially being the biggest scam of the century. Kind of like you, Phil. In my experience, I just haven't seen it drive that consistent ROI in relation to pipeline and revenue. And I think a lot of B2B marketers are blinded by the vanity metrics that exist, and they don't really know actually how poorly their paid search is performing. They kind of see it through a positive lens due to those other metrics. And okay, there could be, and I think there are some campaigns out there that do work in specific industries and niches. It is possible to use it effectively. But just based off of what I've seen, like with my own two eyes, I just have not seen it, deliver that consistent ROI over time. And I've heard it can be effective more in product-driven businesses and things like that. But for me, the cost is just usually too high, and the budget is better spent somewhere else.
Yeah, the evidence that I've experienced is that far more businesses fail to drive closed-won pipeline from paid search than successfully do it. And part of that problem is, I feel that it's not truly aligned to the way buyers buy. There's a very interesting post on LinkedIn today about the day one list and how the majority of deals in B2B go to people who are on the day one list. And, ultimately, clicking an ad doesn't form a critical part of the B2B purchase process, except for transactional purchases in most cases. And furthermore, it's very rare, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen it, to see PPC paid search anyway analyzed, all the way from optimizing campaign metrics through to the revenue generated. And it's a long journey, right? And so it's understandable that in many cases we don't look at the whole journey in terms of content that's produced and case studies that are written. But we know, as we piece together bits of data from different parts of the B2B marketing world, that in the vast majority of cases, and the ones we've seen, the revenue generated isn't worth the investment when it could be put into other things.
And those things, from my perspective, would be things that are more likely to be able to continue to generate you benefit over time. If you invest money in a piece of content, even if it's not a success initially, you've still got something that you can rework, re-promote, and continue to do something with. Once the money is gone, when it comes to SEM, it's gone forever. It's gone in a click.
Right, well, on that note, before we go too far, because I think we're going into other tactics now that are potentially more effective than paid search. So let's go on to number 2, which is SEO, kind of the flip side of SEM, right? You're not paying for this space, you're earning it. So Amanda, do you want to carry on that kind of trail of thought and give us a rating?
No, I think someone else should go first for this one, but yeah.
All right. Do you want me to go? I'll go.
Cool.
Go for it.
Go on.
Right, well, I've gone on completely the other side of the scale here, and I've given SEO a 5. And as much as people keep saying search is dead or dying, I think it just continues to deliver results for businesses, for those businesses that have invested in it for a good period of time. And it is almost not a 5 because it can be quite limiting. You can only capture so much demand through search. Lots of SEO effort can go to waste. Like, you can generate a lot of traffic that may never convert or buy from you. But to be fair, like, more is usually never a bad thing. And I think if you look closely enough, you can see that the businesses occupying the top 1 to 3 results for highly competitive, commercial keywords in your space, they're probably growing at a fast rate. And they are the ones that will be getting that consistent supply of high intent leads. And the other reason why I'm giving this a 5, and I don't know if you guys have looked at it through this lens, but I'm including video in here, specifically YouTube, because optimizing for search, which is essentially SEO, means utilizing all the available formats that are served within that platform. And for me, video is just so effective at every stage of the buyer journey that it instantly boosts SEO anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Most of that I agree with. I think I've given SEO a 5, although as with SEM, I do it with some hesitance because I know that people out there will be thinking, oh, it's lost its position, it's dying or things to that end. But right now, SEO still offers a very reliable, predictable outcome from effort put in. It's so cheap and easy to do the things that make SEO, improve your SEO and help you grow traffic, relatively speaking, to other things. And the effect is lasting. It's an evergreen compounding result. And so it won't always work overnight or instantly. You need to keep looking at it and working at it. And there's nothing guaranteed, as with all marketing tactics. But it's such a safe bet. and it's such a surefire way to drive growth, because buyers who discover you organically early or late in the process convert so much better, easier than others. It's a solid 5, no brainer.
So for me, I've actually taken a bit of a different view on this. I think that in the right space, SEO is one of the most important things you can do, and in that sense, I probably would give it a 5 for the right audience. But more and more, I'm seeing evidence of audiences where SEO is not the right call, where SEO is being used anyway by marketing teams, because it's what they've been learning for the last 5-10 years, regardless of the impact it will actually have on demand, because demand isn't about the people hitting the big broad terms that they're going after with their SEO. It's about the behaviors of a select group of people in very niche roles at the top of very big organizations who don't go out and search, actually. So I'm fence sitting on this one. I've put this as my 3, because ultimately, if you are not the right business for SEO, then if you spend your time and your money on it, it's going to go to waste. And I think a lot of marketers do go after SEO as the golden child tactic that everyone can get behind, regardless of whether it's actually right for their personas. And I think that is something where there's like a lot of mismatch going on, and I'm seeing more and more of the customers and potential customers that I'm talking to are talking about the fact that SEO isn't working for them because it's just not aimed at the people who will actually buy from them.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
Yes,
actually.
a superpower tactic in the right circumstances, but also a great way to have very, very big teams of marketers who will not actually generate demand if you're in the wrong space. So that's my 3.
Yeah, I like the justification behind that, because if there is no demand for that category, I think I looked at it through that lens of, in a lot of B2B cases for well-established categories and products and solutions, there is volume there to go after. But if there are no searches for the things that you're doing, search is not really a viable channel. So
if there is no search for you, I really feel for you, because that's such a harder market to penetrate. So
and even sometimes where there is search, if you are occupying a niche, still going after that search term might not be right for you. If you only serve this particular kind of software to one audience and you already know who all those people are, you might be better off employing other tactics in SEO, even though there appears to be search for it. Because if you end up with everyone and their uncle asking you for that software when you can't serve 95% of them, again, it's a lot of effort, and a lot of time that's going to be spent in your organization as a result. So
cool. All right, let's move on. Number 3 is content marketing. So hang on,
do you want to go first then?
I was just thinking, did I go first last time?
No, you go first.
Yeah, I did.
You did.
All right, I'll go first again. Fine. Well, I'm in with a 5 again, aren't I? I'm so optimistic that most things can work, and I don't like to sit on the fence. So yeah, so far I've been 1, 5, and here I am, 5 again. My reason behind that is the way that I see content marketing is content is basically just marketing now. Like, without content, you don't really have marketing, and buyers are just becoming content consuming machines. Like, we literally live to consume content now with the channels and mediums coming out. Like, we're just bombarded and we love it. And content marketing is just so essential at every stage of the buyer journey. Without it, you don't really have marketing. So for me, it has to be a 5.
I can hop in next. I think content marketing is a must-have, not a nice-to-have. Whatever space you're in, it doesn't, it tailors itself exactly to your audience, because it's about identifying your audience's wants and needs and serving them something that is of value to them. So I think it's essential. I've put it as a 4 because I've only given out 1 5, and I've got that very specifically somewhere else. But I don't think that anyone who wants to market themselves can do without content, and they need to look in the heart of their business for what's most valuable that they have to share with the people who they can help the most ultimately. And so it suits every kind of marketing environment, and it can have great impact in terms of showing your expertise and your abilities, and it adds value rather than noise when done right.
Yeah, I give content marketing a 5 too, and partly in a similar vein to the two of you, because it's borderline no longer a tactic at all, right? I think marketers still class it as a tactic in many cases, and hence it's on our list, but it's borderline not a tactic. It powers everything. It's the essential ingredient in nearly all modern marketing tactics, whether it's a single line for a campaign or a comprehensive piece of content for a pillar, ebook, or white paper, depending on what you're doing. You need content, and you need it in various forms, and you need it in volume, and it needs to be quality. And so it's a table stakes type investment that you're going to need whatever strategy, range of tactics, etc. you employ, and you can't really do without it. So yeah, definite 5.
Yeah. Amanda, I'm keen to know, are you saving that 5, or did you rate content marketing a 4 because your 5 is so powerful, or is there something else?
Yeah, my 5 for me is it's so important, and I think it's the thing that so many brands miss, and they miss the importance of it. So yeah, I've picked it out for that reason, but couldn't do without content marketing at all.
Interesting. Well, I am looking forward to hearing that 5. Right, let's move on. So tactic number 4, we've got social media marketing. Do you want to kick us off, Phil?
Yep. So social media marketing gets a 4 in my book, and it's a contender for a 5. But again, I've looked at these a little bit through what would I prioritize if I want to create a reliable, repeatable outcome. And social media is a very, very effective way to get in front of buyers nowadays. Their attention is there. It's where discovery is taking place. So it's important, and it's almost vitally important. But I don't think it performs nearly as well as it can if you're not able to then do something with that attention. Take it on a journey, convert it, talk to that person, demonstrate your expertise, demo your solution, and so on. So there's other things that have to be there for an investment in social media marketing to pay off. But if you've got those things in place, then it's a very, very important a very important tactic to consider, to use, and to iterate on. So I give it a 4.
Cool. Amanda, do you want to give us your take?
So I am slightly on the other side with this one. I think that because the way I was trying to approach these is if this was the one thing you were going to focus your efforts on, really put your effort behind this year. And I think if you don't have the other things that I've ranked highly, then social actually can be quite a vanity exercise, and it can be, it can lack substance. So I've actually put it as a 2 because I see so much social done badly, and so I think until people have better grounding for their social, and content to support it, and value to add in conversation, I think they should avoid it. I think actually, put your effort into having really good foundations to your marketing, and then go for social. So I wouldn't prioritize it if you don't have those other things in place.
I hear you, but I have still given it a 4.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I hear you in the fact that a lot of marketers are still kind of doing it badly, or not kind of maximizing its effectiveness, possibly. I think the opportunity for social to be a primary channel for acquiring customers is there for a lot of businesses if their audience is on social, but marketers just don't know how to use it effectively. Like, it can be really hard to crack, but I think once you have a framework there, it's just a matter of time before you start seeing results. Like, for us, it has taken a while, but we're now kind of coming through the other side and actually starting to see some consistent inquiries that come through from social, which is great. And I just think there's almost no better way to create demand and educate buyers before they even start thinking about a problem or solution, because they're just flicking through their feed. That we are content consumption machines. We just want to consume that content and learn and educate ourselves. And you can do that through social, and you can build that affinity preference for your brand with a wider audience. That audience scale probably doesn't exist in any other channel. So that's why I'm giving it a 4, but -1 point because it's done badly in so many cases.
Yeah. I think there's a challenge with social, which is like effectiveness is skewed so far towards away from like polished execution to things that are actually best done by individuals when they have the inspiration, and then they tend to improve upon and elevate those things as they get traction. So you tend to see most people going through a period of pretty rough and ready social content creation and interaction, but they need to do that in many cases to get to the place where they're producing the regular polished content. It's a challenging area, as we've found, but has got a lot of potential for B2B organizations.
The only caveat I'd add to that is that we marketers love consuming content, and and people who are in roles like ours love consuming content and learning and are building themselves up. But if your audience is at the pinnacle of their career, let's say, and they are looking more to influence others than be influenced, then actually I would say it's maybe not for you. But I absolutely agree that, when you've got something of value, social is one of the best places to make sure it's discovered. But that only really works if your audience is there. So.
Cool. All right, nice one. Let's move on to tactic number 5, which is podcasting. Do you want to kick us off, Amanda? Don't think you have for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, podcasting for me is part of content marketing, right? It's another form of content, but it is really worth calling out. I've put this one as a 4 again. I think it's a great way. I think a lot of people are really intimidated still by how their efforts can create video consistently, and podcasting is actually a really surprisingly easy way into that. If you want to go pure audio, you can, but as we are doing here, we've created a format that allows us as a group of people who have other responsibilities within our organization to create content regularly, consistently, and add value, as much as we can with our expertise. So I think it's a great return on investment piece, because you get a lot out of it. It's very reusable, can be cut a million different ways and so on. It's not as well established as content marketing more generally, but I think it's a great piece. And if you were to only do one thing, I say good on you if you were going to get into the podcasting space, honestly.
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in next. And I'm actually sitting on the fence in this one. I'm using my 3, despite probably being the biggest podcast listener in the UK. I literally can't do anything without listening to a podcast. I listen to probably at least 1 or 2 a day. But as a B2B marketing tactics, I'm giving it a 3. Although it is becoming more popular for a reason. I think more people are seeing the benefits of doing it, and the benefits outside of the podcast. Like you mentioned, Amanda, it's the content it can provide afterwards where you often see the best results, actually. But the problem, I think, comes with, the podcast itself as an isolated thing needs so much time to actually work and be effective. The most big successful podcasts that you can think of probably have 200, 300 plus episodes. So it's really hard to do and show success in isolation. Like, I'm kind of taking the point of it being able to amplify your other content away and just looking at solely podcasting. And it's just hard. It takes a lot of time and lift to get the most from it. But when you do get it right and you do start to grow an audience and you do it consistently, and you don't kind of cut it off too soon because you're trying to prove some ROI from it that doesn't really exist yet, and you're doing it for the wrong reasons. But yeah, I'm giving it a 3 because I couldn't give it any lower, really, because I just love podcasts.
Yeah, I hear you. I gave podcasting my 3 as well. So there you go. Read into that what you will. Podcasting is really compelling and very attractive. You know, I'm very excited about what it can do for businesses when it comes to, you know, creating demand in a buyer-centric manner that's pleasing to everybody. It's got a great place, but you know, it doesn't. The barrier to entry is slightly higher. The time to results slightly longer. It doesn't trump other foundational activities, in my opinion, and therefore it's kind of like, do it if you've got the other more critical things in place and working nicely, and the barriers aren't insurmountable or unnecessarily high, then go for it. But yeah, I'm in that sort of fence sitting, do it if you can, do it if you're ready, do it if you want to, but if you're not, then I'm okay with taking time to get other things right. In the majority of cases, you know, these demand creation activities, you know, I think are best executed when you've got demand capture set up, running and working well, and then is a good time to look at things like podcasting. But you know, love what podcasting can do.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on, and I think you should carry on that note, Phil, because the next point is the next tactic is website CRO, and you're kind of just going down the demand capture route. So what's your rating?
Absolutely. Website CRO gets a 4 in my book, and it's an interesting area in B2B because website CRO is something that I think is worth everybody doing and everybody looking at their website and observing the customer journey. But in most cases, it won't be conversion rate optimization in the sense that most of us think when we hear the phrase, which is change the color of this button, change one word over here, measure the impact. We don't have the pleasure of those sorts of swings on a lot of B2B websites. So CRO for me is more aggregating information from outside your website, looking at data that your website is giving back to you about the customer journey, and using that to make informed decisions about how you can change the user experience for the better and so on. But that said, you know, your website's always there. Your website should always be generating, you know, high intent inquiries for you. So it's always worth looking at what can be better about it and how you can make it easier for the buyer to travel all the way from discovering you to making that all important inquiry. So 4.
Do you want to go, Amanda?
Yeah, this is my 5. For me, I took a slightly broader view of website CRO. Essentially, for me, and the way I've always seen a website is as the net underneath all of the other tactics that you could possibly be doing. Whether someone sees you on social, sees an ad for you, hears you mentioned at an event or by a colleague, I expect that at some point in your journey, if someone wants to buy from you, they are going to look you up and look at your website. And if it's not up to scratch, even in the broadest possible sense, not down to the level of finessing this behavior or that behavior, then all other efforts are meaningless, frankly. And I've worked with companies who have said things to me like, our sales team pretend we don't have a website because they're so ashamed of it. Now, then you're undermining, your sales team are actually feeling undermined by your website. It can have so much impact if you're at an event and then people go to your site and actually it doesn't match up to the journey that you know, they were expecting from your fantastic stand, or they've heard someone from your business speak and then they feel, oh, this doesn't back up what this person was saying. It can be so detrimental to that sense of trust that you need to build if someone is going to buy from you ultimately. So yeah, this is my 5.
Nice.
Yeah, I've also given it a 5, and kind of along the same lines, you know, it's the backbone of all of your marketing. All of the other tactics in this list will probably end up, you know, kind of merging back into your website anyway. It's really the heart of your marketing. It's where B2B buyers want to go to learn about you and research and convert, obviously, essentially, at the end of the day. And I don't think there's any more simple lever you can pull to get more high intent leads, more pipeline, than making those improvements on your website to get more buyers through the door. Essentially, I think it's the one thing that marketers can actually change, that we can say has a direct impact on pipeline generation. We're often too far removed from that in a lot of scenarios to really, impact actual closed won and that kind of thing, because we're not talking to said opportunity. But in terms of getting people through the door, like website CRO is one of those things that we actually can impact directly and have a huge success with.
Yeah, I'm tempted, based on both your responses, to upgrade it to a 5, but I'm going to stick with my 4. I mean, I'm a huge believer in the power of website user experience, as everybody knows, but it's different to, conversion rate optimization in B2C e-commerce. You can't do an A/B test every day and get a statistically confident result that you can act on. So you have to take a slightly different approach that's a bit more drawn out, and you tend to make step changes rather than incremental changes. So it's got its nuance, it's got its challenge in B2B, but it's incredibly important.
Yeah. And the impacts it can have, I think, is just so great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the negative impact it can have, that for me is the thing that I've seen you see so much of, I think, which is, that any other effort that you've got can be undone by the power of a bad website.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Very true. All right, let's get into tactic number 7, which is email marketing. And I'll kick things off here. I've given it a 2. And Phil, we were just talking yesterday, actually, weren't we, about how much of a mess our inboxes are. I mean, it's just, it is just relentless. The amount of spam and outreach you get is just, it seems higher than ever. And I think I was saying, how the subject line, Dan, quick question, just keeps coming through. And then literally a minute later, I got an email with that exact subject line, which is just hilarious. But yeah, I'm not seeing email marketing as a highly effective tactic going forwards. I think in this AI type era, email is just too robotic. It's the easiest channel to kind of manipulate. And I think buyers are just becoming aware of that. And it's really, really difficult to stand out and be creative through an email compared to other channels like social and podcasting and that kind of thing. But I haven't given it a 1. It's still a 2, because I think businesses that do have that hard-earned, engaged database of willing subscribers can use email marketing as another lever that they can pull. The way that I think about it is, when you're launching a product or doing some big thing, what do you do to kind of get that instant lift? And a lot of us will say email. In most cases, you're going to send an email to your database to try and get some kind of lift on engagement or viewership or, sales potentially on this thing. And in a lot of cases, you can actually see that expected lift. But yeah, basically, just because of all the bad emails and spam that I'm just sick of, I'm keeping it as a 2.
I'm a 2 as well. I've greatly enjoyed being on the other side of the 3 fence from you guys on a number of occasions so far this episode. But if it were unsolicited emails specifically, like the ones that you've mentioned, -500, honestly could not hate anything more than getting an email that's pretending that I've missed an email. People don't understand how well I manage my inbox, thank you very much, and I find it insulting. I've compared it to pickup artistry in the past. I think it's dreadful stuff. I'm not ashamed to say it. I agree, though. There is a place for the well-crafted, content curated email from an expert if you are building a brand that adds value in that way. But most people are not in that space, and most people are not using that tactic. They are trying to neg people into engaging with them and getting many, many capital letter unsubscribe replies from me.
Yeah, it's a 2 from me as well. And it's a really interesting and slightly problematic one, because kind of like with paid search, like the general sort of consensus, the noise that we all hear is that email marketing is an incredibly powerful channel that delivers great results. And yet my experience and the experience of everyone I've met is different. And so I am intrigued as to how people find that email is one of the most powerful channels. And I suspect that the devil's in the detail, and that you're looking at the, the close rate relative to the, outreach effort you're doing, which is in the 0.02% bracket, and it looks good in that lens or something. But ultimately, email doesn't drive buyer behavior in the experience that I've had. The email inbox, as you've described, is becoming worse and worse and worse. It's a disaster area, full stop. And, and the majority of us, the vast majority of us, do not create email-worthy messages on the regular basis that is required, I think, to see email as a really powerful channel. So one that confounds me to some degree, but again, in terms of seeing it produce reliable, predictable outcomes, it scores low, in my opinion, and it gets a 2.
Is that the first one we agree on?
I think it might be, actually.
I think it might be. I think we should go
Phil
back.
and I have had quite a few. I think we've agreed on quite a few, Phil. But
you and Phil have agreed on a lot. I've enjoyed being the cat on
great
pigeons
minds.
on this.
That's why you're so needed, Amanda. Because otherwise, Phil and I just agree all the time.
Boring.
Yeah, very boring. Right, let's move on to tactic number 8, which is PR. An interesting one. Can somebody else start this? I don't feel like starting this one.
Oh, well, buckle up.
I'm gonna get in there and get out of the way. I'm giving PR a 1. I've never had a thing for PR. I've always thought it feels like a huge amount of effort for the B2B companies that I work with, want to support, grow. It feels like an awful lot of effort for absolutely no return in the majority of cases. And relative to other things that I can see the logical connection between the effort I put in and the result I get out, it doesn't come close. And I know there are lots of people out there practicing PR, and I'm sure that they view it very differently, but I just don't see the benefit, don't see the purpose, and even more so in the age we're entering, where the nature of content and the nature of consumption is changing rapidly. So one from me.
I'm also a 1. I've worked in an environment where PR was very, very heavily involved in marketing's efforts, and even there, which was a B2C space, I should say, I often felt that the value that could be generated for the cost was very, very minimal and would very rarely turn into anything. I do think there was a window in time where digital PR supporting content had value, but I just don't see that working these days. I don't see people supporting each other's content unless it's got genuine value, and then it's more about relationship building between the content creators than it is the middleman of PR, in my opinion. So it's a big fat 1 from me. It's my lowest score.
Yeah, I'm kind of down the same lines. I've given it a 2. The optimist in me, I find it hard to rate things low. But the way I see PR, and I don't have a lot of experience in it, to be honest, but actually when I think of PR now, I never ever think of PR in a B2B marketing sense. I always think of it in a kind of like PR in like sports and for entertainment and that kind of thing. But anyway, that's by the by. What I think about PR is that elements of PR and B2B marketing have actually been swallowed up by other tactics, like kind of similar to what you were saying, Amanda. There's not much forced collaboration between like brands and individuals now. It's more like content creators actually kind of collaborating with content rather than, oh, this brand is working with this brand because their PR teams are wanting to work together. It doesn't really work like that anymore. It's content creators rather than, you know, PR leading the way. But the thing I was toying with in my mind is there are potentially still cases where it could be relevant for bigger organizations who might need to like distribute big ticket news and kind of get feedback on this and do it in a careful way. But for most businesses, thinking about PR as its own thing just isn't really relevant in this day and age.
No.
I think you speak to a good point that there are some brands whose knowledge and expertise positions them well to be the people that media approach for comment, but they are few and far between. They are very specific instances and spaces. And so, but that's not PR's effort. That is having a media relations angle and way into your world, not necessarily having someone going and having lunch with the editors of the relevant publications in London, which is more of my experience of that world.
All right,
yeah,
cool.
Just not current anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, let's move on to tactic number 9, which is influencer marketing. And this is kind of where I said I think PR has kind of been swallowed up a little bit into just other areas like influencer marketing, but I'll still give it a 1. I don't think it's there yet. If we were talking B2C marketing tactics, it might even be a 5. I think it's that influential in that space. But in most cases, B2B purchases are just complex, large, non-impulsive, and it's so hard to have so much influence from one person or a few people in some cases that it's just not effective and consistent enough.
Okay. Amanda?
I see this slightly above PR. I see this as a 2 personally. I think there's some scope, and the reason I think there is some scope for it to have more impact, you know, and for that to continue is I would put partnership and that peer-to-peer content support piece into this category. It's not that well defined. We're not in a B2B space where you're going to get someone who's getting sent products to review. Like we're talking we're talking B2B, but I would say that if you have an expert who is related, like a consultant that you work closely with, co-creation and promotion as an approach, and sharing some of the effort and sharing some of the reward, there's that I think falls into the category of influencer for B2B, actually.
Yeah, that kind of aligns with what I was thinking, which was when we think about individuals who by their own name carry influence over a market, we're not there, and I don't know if we'll ever be there in a B2B context, because it takes so much time and cost to acquire the knowledge that it would require to become influential in a space like CRM software or project management software, or, you know, any other kind of software, or any technical product or B2B product, you know. So individual influencer marketing feels really quite far off. But as I mentioned to you yesterday, Dan, in B2B, the influencers are actually the research companies and the comparison companies that are one form of influence. So if you can be mentioned by Gartner, then that's going to have a huge amount of influence. But it's hard to group that with influencer marketing in the traditional sense. So I'm going to give it a 2 on the basis that we're not seeing those individuals with those names. There are well-known individuals, but I don't see them opening themselves up to being influencers in the sense that the term tends to inspire. But there are bodies and groups and people that have influence in the industries that we work in, and they represent an opportunity to reach a large number of people, and, you know, their words carry a lot of weight, as we know with, you know, some of the businesses we work with.
I think I'd probably separate out those kind of relationships where you typically have to pay to be mentioned. You know, that's that I think is the tricky point, isn't it? Because influencer for me, I don't know.
It's a lot of the time, but it's a different magnitude of cost, most likely.
Yes.
And I mean,
exactly.
You know, again, you probably don't buy your mentions, but as we know firsthand, benefiting from the evaluation or the perception that you get from those influencing bodies comes at a cost. And so, yeah, I mean, when you look at influencer marketing in B2B relative to other tactics available to you, it's hard to put it any higher than a 2.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's move on to tactic number 10, which is event marketing. Who wants to go first? Do you want me to go for it? Okay. I've given event marketing a 4. So I think it's up there. I think event marketing as a whole is just massive. You've got in-person events, digital events, webinars, all of these kind of things that all serve different purposes, and they're all great. Like, they all have their kind of place in a marketing strategy. When it comes to traditional event marketing, the great thing is I think most industries can pinpoint 1 or 2 events where they know their audience will be, and it's often a pretty safe way to get in front of them if some of these other tactics aren't viable in their particular space. So that can be useful, but I think a lot of marketers can still do more to get the most out of their sponsorship or booth at a place like that. When we had Sarah Brannock on from Hunter, she was talking about the kind of switch she had in thinking about events, in that she's starting to use it more as brand activations, and a lot of other companies and successful marketing teams are using it as brand activations rather than thinking about it as a kind of lead generation exercise. How many badge scans can we get? It's kind of like, how much noise can we make here? How much of a kind of stamp can we make on this event, and really start to just get some like brand recall and recognition more than like, I got Dave's email address at this company kind of thing. It's thinking more about just being more creative with the event and creating more content from it and using it as a brand exercise rather than an event exercise. But I suppose even if you don't have like that traditional event, I think there's just so many ways that events can be used effectively to engage with an audience. You've got intimate events like virtual, like I said, that they all kind of sit at different purchase stages and can be effective. So yeah, it gets a 4, but I've kind of explained that like it should be a 5, but it's a 4.
I'm going at a 4 as well, actually. I think that one of the things I think is, let's imagine that you're, a marketer and you've got a pot of money to spend, and you're thinking about one thing that you're going to spend it on this year. If you're going to spend it on events, you know that those events are going to be relevant to your audience. Whereas if you're going to spend it on something like social, there's more of a risk that you start by doing things that aren't particularly targeted, and that you are not necessarily backing it up with the content that will make it valuable, and so on. So for me, events are not something anyone enters into lightly, and it's usually a more considered decision because it's a bigger one-off spend. So if you're then working to make sure that you get the most out of that spend in terms of ongoing value, I think that's a really good and solid thing to do. And if the event does exist in your space that you can be part of, or you can create the event using your expertise and knowledge and the value of your team, then great.
Interesting. I like what events can offer, and I probably would have given it a 3 if I had a 3 at my disposal, but I've used that already. So I ended up giving it a 2, and I think it.
Harsh.
I think my view of events here kind of emulates your view of social media a bit, Amanda, which is to say that an event on its own can very easily be a catastrophic waste of money and a failure. Because, as we all know, going to events with a lead generation goal and hoping to collect enough business cards to drive some pipeline off the back of it is, that approach has been proven to be incredibly unreliable and not work. And so without other things, without brand, without positioning, without demand being, present already, I'd really I'd really hesitate to invest in events of certain kinds, in advance of or ahead of those other things we've talked about. And events they can be small, they can be easy, they can be cheap, but they can also be expensive and big and risky and costly. And so it does depend a lot on what you're talking about. But I do remember for quite some time, HubSpot themselves said that they wouldn't attend events, period, because their view was the ROI just wasn't present. They would only host their own events, and I think that's an interesting angle to take and look at it, where if you're hosting your own events and you're attracting an audience of a certain size to a relevant event, you can potentially have really good really good results. But that's almost content marketing again, I suppose, in a way. So as a broad brush, relative to other things, given the risks that come with just doing them as a punt or in isolation without a really good strategy behind it, I would downgrade it and I give it a 2.
Yeah. The thing is with that HubSpot example, though, it's like HubSpot still saw the value of events. They just took a different approach to it. Event marketing to them was still extremely exciting and something that could work. They just had a different approach that worked for them at that time, with probably a lot of budget behind.
Yeah, I suppose it does. There's multiple versions of event marketing, like with all these things, but it's in terms of a reliable, repeatable result, a little bit harder to ensure, I reckon.
All right. I think
the effects of that can be mitigated massively if you are repurposing the content that was generated by the event, whatever it was. And even if you design that into the way you're either putting together an event or you're being part of someone else's event. So I think that there is room to create longevity. And I think, yes, it can. I mean, obviously the flip side of it is it can be an incredibly costly space where you're spending obscene amounts of money on stand design to stand out next to your bigger competitor, etc., where you're being asked to act as if you've got the same amount of money as them in order to actually stand a chance of getting any attention. That side of things I would not necessarily advise, and I would say almost links quite closely to the world of PR that I've already said is a 1. But when you are purposeful with events, I think that you can make a huge amount out of them.
Yeah, I think a conclusion that I'm reaching, and I know we're not quite done yet, but a conclusion I'm reaching is that with the exception of perhaps PR, email marketing, and paid search, in an ideal world, I'd like to see businesses doing all of these things, probably tackling them in a certain order, but definitely a 2 for me is not a don't do it.
Okay.
Don't do it, period. These things have all got potential and merit and application. Just doesn't necessarily score highest in my assessment. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that was 10 tactics, but since I realized this morning that we missed one of those off of the list, we actually have 11 now. So we should we're just gonna keep adding them onto the list. But no, there is just 11. So there's one more to add on. Tactic number 11 is ABM. Anyone want to go for?
I've just realised that in my mind, ABM probably has all scores at the same time. Because this is the ultimate depends, right? And the problem with ABM is that so much of the time when it's said, it isn't done. And so I gave it a low score. I gave it a 2, but ultimately, if your target market is such that you really do know who your named accounts are and working with them and only them is the route to growth, then ABM scores, 5 and then some. But in most cases, ABM is tossed out as our demand generation, demand capture isn't working well enough. Let's quote ABM at people and see if that's a solution to our problem. But as I'm sure you are both going to help people understand, ABM isn't a marketing tactic on its own. It's so much more than that. It isn't a quick win, an overnight fix to a lead generation or a pipeline generation problem. It's much more than that. And it's often used, or the term is often used in places where it isn't truly what's necessary or required.
Yeah. I'm happy to jump in there. I've given ABM a 4, a little bit more optimistic. It probably would have had a 3 if I'm totally honest, because it is that huge. It depends. Like you said, Phil, the problem with ABM is it's not actually, I mean, I wouldn't put it into the category of a marketing tactic. It's a commercial tactic. Like marketing and sales have to work so closely together in order to make it work. And it's really complex to get right. But I think for lots of businesses, it's actually becoming the best way, and in some cases, the only way to have that kind of hyper personalized approach to get into their tier 1 ideal customer accounts. I was listening to Dave Gerhardt's Exit 5 podcast with Hilary Carprio. I think I pronounced that right. She's head of ABM at Snowflake, and she was talking about the complexities of ABM, which it's just mind-blowing the amount of work this entire operation takes. And, that's like a 5,000 plus person company. If you're thinking about doing ABM at like a 50, 100 person company, it's almost impossible to do it effectively at that hyper personalized scale, I suppose. But then people call ABM, all kinds of things. If you're doing some kind of targeted list on LinkedIn to a group of companies, is that ABM? Maybe. Another point is, I think the shift from lead gen to demand gen that so many companies are getting behind for the right reasons is also lending itself to ABM. We know from like Cognizant's approach that instead of sales phoning up all of these leads and MQLs that marketing created, they actually repositioned to kind of take a more account-based approach and go after their high tier ideal customers. So yeah, I think there are cases for it. It probably would have been a 3, but I think done right, it could be a 4.
I am with you, Dan. I think this is a 4 for me as well. You're so right when you say that this is a commercial tactic. And I think if nothing else, one of the things is that if you are committed to ABM, it's not just an effort coming out of marketing. It is an effort that is support that needs close alignment with sales. And I think many sales and marketing organizations are not organized together. So actually, I think it's one of the better approaches that companies can take to make sure that they are working on the same things for the same goals. There's a huge range, from one to one, to one to many, and every kind of shade and combination in between. I do think that it is possible to do ABM on a very small scale out of a very small team. It just requires immense, strategic thinking and understanding of budget, not just being about money, but being about your other resources, the time you have available, the skills that you have available in your team. So I do think that plenty of organizations could do it more, but they might need a really, really good definition of how they're going to do it rather than just slapping around the term, which is where I think a lot of companies currently go wrong. And I can understand why Phil gave it a 2.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to do it on a smaller scale, it's as important to identify what you're not going to do, because it's impossible for marketing teams, not just their agencies, to do many things in parallel to a high level of impact. And we've encountered that problem again and again. And we give the same advice when it comes to how many personas you target, right? If you've got 10 personas, you may as well divide your budget by 10 in terms of impact you can have. I think as well that lead generation versus demand generation is a shift that can be made throughout ABM and all other forms of go-to-market. And a long time ago, Amanda, you said something to me which stuck with me, which is that, and I'm interested to know if you still stand by, which is that inbound is on a spectrum with ABM, and the spectrum is audience size ultimately. And if an entire industry is your audience, then inbound is the approach. Although I would advocate for inbound demand generation over lead generation, as I'm sure we all would. But if your audience is narrow and small and identifiable, then you're by necessity you're moving up the spectrum towards ABM, and I think that is a really great way to think about it.
I still stand by that. I think the only thing, the caveat I would put to it is it's not just about size, it's about behavior. So if you've got a small audience, but they are the 10 people searching for a term a month, then SEO supporting inbound demand generation is part of your makeup, and it has to be. If they don't search by habit, then your ABM makeup has different things in it. So yes, absolutely.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, we're at the hour, so let's wrap things up there. But I thought that was really fun, actually. I really enjoyed that. I enjoy every episode, but that was something different and fun. And so, yeah, if you did enjoy it, let us know. I'd love to know the feedback. And if you want to kind of hear or see more of this style of content, because I think we're definitely up for doing it. But let's wrap it up there anyway. And hopefully you did enjoy this episode of Demand Decoded. And be sure to follow us on LinkedIn to join all the future live events and listen to previous episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watch on YouTube. Just search for Demand Decoded. So we'll see you there. And yeah,